We have made some changes to Encompass specific to non-delegated underwritten loans. The file will start as it normally would. When the file is handed off at the processing milestone, there's still the required field of whether or not the file is underwritten as delegated or non-delegated file. If you were to choose non-delegated, when you save the file, you're going to get a pop-up that is going to notify you that the milestones are going to change. When that appears, click OK. A confirmation will appear as well, asking you if you want to confirm that these milestones are going to be removed. Click OK. Now that these milestones have updated over here to the non-delegated milestones, the branch has edit rights on that file all the way through to clear to close. Some things that are going to happen during this file. During processing and the file started milestone, life is going to go on about as normal with the file. We have made a few defaults for you though. On the underwriting summary, which is a tool that the underwriters typically use, the branch does not have experience using these, so we've defaulted the underwriter consideration of these factors. This is for QM purposes. If we did not default these, you would not receive a valid QM recommendation. The branch also has access now to some additional forms that it would not otherwise see. One of them is a PR checklist. The PR checklist is simply a tool for the branch to be able to see the items that are going to be reviewed at the UA review milestone. Giving insight to these items that often cause delay provides the branch the opportunity to make sure that that file has the right data integrity to accommodate a swift handoff at the UA review milestone. To additionally help with that, we've provided a job aid that identifies the steps that you go through specifically and update in the file. That's provided with the supplemental information. So as the file is going through these milestones, the branch can use the PR checklist as a guide as far as making sure that the file has the correct information uploaded and updated in the file. The file is going to continue its normal pass through to QC ready. However, once QC 1 review is done on the file is going to be turned back over to the branch. So QC is going to complete the submittal ready expected milestone. What that's telling the branch is you're good to submit this file to the investor. After that milestone is completed, the branch may still have some work to do before that file is ready to be submitted to the investor. All of that work should be done prior to the submittal milestone being completed. Once the submittal milestone is completed and marked finished, that indicates to us that the file has been submitted to the investor for a credit decision. At the time of that credit decision, if it's an approval, then the conditional approval should be, the investor approval milestone should be finished. You cannot finish this milestone until you have uploaded the investor's conditional approval to the e-folder. At this time, it is required for us to go through and update this file as well to make sure that our terms in the loan match the terms of the investor's approval. After the investor's approval, the file is going to go into UA review. So the branch turns the file over to the review to be completed. The UA review is going to be completed. The QC2 review is going to be completed. And then that file is going to be pushed into clear to close. After the clear to close is finished, the branch now is limited to read-only rights on the file. Because there is nobody else touching this file and the branch has edit rights, there are certain data that needs to be input to the file that would not be typically input on a delegated file. We have a new form called the non-del processor forms. This form consists of several different buttons which may or may not be applicable to your transaction. With the supplemental material, there's a walkthrough of each of these buttons in the fields to explain what should be in those fields and what must be completed. At a high level, we'll flip through them though. On the General tab, one very specific requirement that needs to be input, and you do not have to wait for the approval to do this. I would do this at the earliest stage possible. As soon as you run DU, LP, or GUS, input your ATR QM risk assessment information in this section right here. You must additionally input your AUS information down here. If you have a VA or an FHA loan, these fields must be completed. In our example, we're looking at a conventional loan. I'd gone through already and input a fictitious case file ID, which obviously you want to use a real one in the live environment. And the only thing I did not input yet is my AUS recommendation. And I did this so that you could see what the ATR QM management is going to recommend before I input this. With this information input without an AUS recommendation, then Encompass is telling us that this is a non-QM loan. That's what that general ATR means. It's a non-QM loan. But we are doing a qualified mortgage. For the system to make a qualified mortgage recommendation, we have to have the AUS information input. The only thing that I have not input so far is my AUS feedback. Now that that information is in, going back to my ATR QM management, I now have a qualified mortgage that is recognizing that the file meets Fannie Mae's requirements. And in this instance, the file is eligible for safe harbor. So going back to the approval information, under the General tab, regardless of your loan type, this information must be filled out for you to have a valid QM recommendation. The purchase information is only applicable to purchase transactions. However, if you have a for sale by owner transaction, do not write NA in for the agent's information. Click these boxes over here that there are no agents involved in the transaction. Once the loan is registered with the investor, it should be marked as registered. You should identify the investor that it's going to be assigned to or submitted to. On the Property and Appraisal tab, most of this should be filled out as you order it. So as you get the appraisal, your appraisal type would be identified. The appraiser's contact information, the date that it was completed, and the appraisal expiration date should all be updated as that appraisal comes in. You won't typically have a review appraisal, but it's very possible. If you have a conditional commitment that must be issued, there's detailed steps and the directions on how to do this. The flood information is a required field for the file to be pushed past the approval milestone. Typically, underwriting would fill this out. However, since it is an external underwriter and no one else is touching the file, that is a field that you're going to be inputting at an earlier stage. We are in the process of automatically prompting the flood to be ordered when the file is submitted to processing. So you will get that determination at a much earlier stage in the loan cycle. We did that because there is a requirement for the instance that flood insurance is required, that the borrower receive those disclosures with sufficient time for them to review the documents and the requirements of coverage and obtain coverage prior to closing. Typically, that is 5 to 10 days, at least, before the file can close. So we want to get that disclosure out as early as possible. For this purpose, you want to make sure that you have that flood determination identified in this field once that determination is made. If you have an FHA loan, there are fields that are specific for FHA, VA, and USDA accordingly. Again, there's detailed instruction in this supplemental material that I'll walk you through all of these. In the Approval tab, this conditional approval box is it's no longer just limited to drop-down. For an external underwritten loan, you can actually type in here the name of the underwriter who has approved that file with the investor. Input the date of their conditional approval. The expiration date of that conditional approval actually goes down here in the underwriter's expiration. And again, we have the ability to input their name in this section. If the investor suspends the file, then you would identify that suspense by occurring down here. However, a suspense is not a credit decision. That has not allowed us to prompt and finish the investor approval milestone because they've not approved the file. They have requested more information for them to be able to approve it. If the investor denies the file, you would go in and put their underwriter's name in this field, the date of their denial, the date that you had mailed the notice to the applicant. There are shortcuts on here for the FACT Act disclosure, so you can populate all of the required credit components of that statement of credit denial, and a shortcut to the statement of denial itself. The reason for denial is a drop down here. However, once you go to the statement of credit denial, you still must select the reason, at least the primary reason of the declination. In a conventional loan with mortgage insurance, once you have the cert and the amount of coverage and the MI provider, that information should be input on here. Your FHA and HUD approval information would all be identified over here. The underwriter snapshot has some business rules tied to it, therefore they must be completed before it gets pushed through. It actually gives you the ability to copy the loan's current data into the system and do a reconciliation of the way it was last reviewed to how it's reviewed now. You would check the box at the bottom when you're ready to push the file through for the UA review. As a loan moves from processing to QC ready, that's kind of where your milestones take a dip and start changing. So your submittal ready, when QC has performed its review and turned that file back over to the branch, submittal ready is expected. At that point, the QC1 and the underwriter dispatch are going to be identified already. Once the file is submitted to the investor, at that point, then the HMDA indicator to exclude this file from the HMDA LAR is automatically checked. If a file as a non-delegated file is not submitted to the investor for a credit decision, if we deny it or close it for incompleteness or withdraw it prior to submitting to the investor, that is still a HMDA reportable transaction for us. As the file continues its progress, different roles are going to be assigned at various milestones. In the event that a file was started as a non-delegated file, but later converts to a delegated file, then the milestones and every assigned party to that file are going to be backed up all the way back here to the QC ready. Because at that point, the file is going to take a different path through our operations and new parties are going to be assigned to that file. Therefore, it is critical if a file has already passed that QC ready milestone that you not go and change the delegation method unless you truly are taking it from a delegated submission to a non-delegated submission at that point.